Hey everybody, welcome back to Avalon, episode 30, and we're back again working on our new train station. So before we get into placing some more buildings and working more on the station itself, I decided to take a little bit of a second look at the way that our trains actually approach the station. So I got some feedback in previous episodes, and I kind of agree with it, mostly regarding just the fact that we didn't really have connections between all of the different lines as we approach the station. And in my mind, I sort of imagined that, you know, each kind of section of two tracks were sort of associated with a different section of the whole train loop. So it didn't really make a lot of sense to actually connect them because, you know, trains wouldn't necessarily be sharing between these different lines. But as it turns out, it's pretty standard to just connect everything that's coming into the station. So I figured it would make the most sense if we went ahead and made it so that if you are on any of the lines coming into the station, you can actually access any of the different actual platforms. So that's what this whole effort is about. Now, I'm not really going into detail about actually, you know, how I'm going to detail this area or, you know, how we're going to make it fit in with the rest of the surrounding area. The main goal here was just to lay down the tracks that would make this possible. So when we actually start detailing the station, we don't accidentally block any areas that we may need to make all these connections. And then of course we'll come back in a future episode and actually detail this area. But for now, this is what I came up with, and it actually went pretty well. I think that the new layout is much better. It did require some weird things like you're seeing now. The one thing about the other side of the station is that we have two lines that immediately elevate, and they elevate so rapidly because they have to get over top of the other lines to go and branch to the right, that we couldn't even split off and merge with the rest of the lines in time. So I had all three other lines just merge with each other, and then I had this one do a big loop that then connects to that merging point on the ground level there. So that's sort of what I came up with. It was also a bit more of a challenge to connect all of the lines on the front end. I know we're not even there anymore in the footage, but I wanted to bring this up. Something interesting that I noticed about other big train stations, especially in Tokyo, was kind of where I was really getting a lot of my inspiration from. Tokyo and Osaka, is it seems like most of these stations, they will all merge down into maybe two tracks, and those two tracks will then, you know, extend out, and they might have many lines running on them at the same time, and then they will branch off, and those lines will take those branches accordingly. But in our case, we have so many lines that were, you know, so close to the station, like so many lines that then branch off again very near to the station, that it didn't make sense to merge them onto one single track section and then split them off again. So we had a weird scenario where we just had all of these lines like parallel, and it made it hard to take a bunch of parallel lines and connect it to a bunch of parallel lines and have them all connect without having a bunch of crisscrossing and dangerous looking tracks. So that's kind of what I came up with. I know I've really talked over that area at this point, but I just wanted to explain the logistics there, and of course we'll come back to that and actually detail it more. But anyway, getting back to what we're doing right now, we're going to start expanding our elevated walkway to get over to the station itself. So I had this idea in my mind ever since we started working on these elevated walkways. I really wanted to have like a really full elevated pedestrian centric area that spans the entire station. So we're going to have stuff like this all the way across the station. Now this is really like the critical junction. This is the area that is pretty much the center of the station that will connect to the commercial district. It'll connect to other parts of the station, the other platforms. So it definitely needs to be large, and this will almost certainly be the largest area in terms of surface area where we have elevated walkway, and it's certainly wide. It'll present some interesting challenges in filling the space later on, which we'll talk about in future episodes, but of course we're going to make quite a bit of use out of the procedural objects mod to make this whole thing work. I tried to make it look pretty organic. So again, we're going with this sort of curved look, which it was kind of weird to figure out how all of this should fit together, because we already have a big curve on the other side, and I didn't know exactly how specifically this connection to this this middle joint should all go. I'm going to tweak this quite a bit, actually, not even in this episode, but in future episodes. We're really just getting kind of the groundwork down to figure out what we need for this area, and then we'll come back and certainly make changes as we need to and as we start detailing, but really getting, at the very least, some rough drafts for where the pedestrian lines should go or where the pedestrian walkways should go. That certainly makes it easier to start planning out our buildings, because they're kind of codependent, which is a little tricky, right? Like we need to know where the walkways are so we can start placing buildings, but we also, you know, we don't want to make it hard to actually plop the buildings if we have walkways covering critical areas or the areas that give us the most wiggle room for making large buildings. So I'm trying to slowly progress both of them as we cross the station, and that's sort of why you've seen this kind of ping-ponging back and forth between placing the pedestrian walkways and then placing buildings and going back and forth. I'm also trying very deliberately to not get too ahead of myself as I do this, which is tricky, right? Because what I want to do when I start placing these is I just want to lay out the entire pedestrian walkway. But I mean, we have so much work to do, even in the area just you know, in front of the station where the road is, and the back side of what we were working on last episode. So I don't want to expand out too fast. I find it really demotivating, actually, to get too far ahead of myself, especially with stuff like this, because it looks so rough when you just throw down the pedestrian walkways and you don't have anything else. It just doesn't look super great, and when you really start expanding out and making a lot of areas that look really unfinished, it's really, I don't know, it can be kind of daunting. Like, you feel like you have to tie it all together somehow. So I find that a way that I stay motivated is by trying to limit how quickly I expand and really polish areas as I go. So anyway, back to what we're doing right now again. I guess I keep getting distracted here, but I wanted to focus on mostly this side of the station, so this side of the main spoke, and also kind of alongside the road there. So it was a bit of a challenge figuring out how to fill these areas. This side isn't so bad because I knew I wanted to have a bunch of commercial and some, you know, some shopping, but it was more challenging the specific like area right along where the track is and also where the road is. You saw way earlier in the episode I put down like a big fence, which really filled some space, but I want to maintain the density across these two lines of track and this road, and there's just really no space for buildings. So we'll need to do lots of work with, well, definitely with props, with some details, and kind of create our own interesting details and things that aren't necessarily buildings, which is really like some of the most creative parts of the game in my opinion, but it's also some of the most tedious. So we'll tackle that in a future episode. Now here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make an easy way to get to all the different platforms. I realized that there was that one crossing that came with the actual station on the very far end of a station, but this is a very long station. Like it's almost triple. I think it's like 2.5 times the size of the regular station, because it's designed for the high-speed trains. So they're very long trains. We need very long stations. So we certainly need a way to get over to the other sides of the station. So I figured we would at least start with these. I knew that I wanted to have a set of procedural objects that actually fit over top of our train. Now, it does turn out that I'm probably going to change this. I don't think that I'm gonna like stick with this one. I wasn't really a huge fan of the look. It kind of looks temporary. Like, it doesn't look like it's really built into the environment. So we'll tweak this quite a bit, but this was the preliminary start to how we're gonna solve that problem. This area was also kind of interesting because, of course, it is very low. We don't have a lot of clearance with that train track coming out there, so we've got some very narrow space to work with, which actually kind of really adds to, I wanted to play off of it and create that busy, dense, kind of claustrophobic feel in some of these areas. So we'll certainly get into that more when we start detailing. But of course, just like with the last 2 episodes or 3 episodes or so, this one is mostly focused on getting the buildings laid out, getting the pathways laid out, and starting to plan out this next section. And I'm thinking that's kind of how we're going to tackle a lot of these in the future. We'll start out with the pedestrian walkways, we'll you know, throw in some commercial buildings and things of that nature, and then we'll come back in the next episode, we'll do some detailing, and then we'll really tie it all in with a third episode of like polish and final details. And I know that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of sequential episodes, but I think it's really worthwhile. And I think that the station is really shaping up to be one of the coolest parts of Avalon, so I certainly don't want to shy away from spending lots of time on making it as awesome as we possibly can. So that's why it's been so many episodes in a row. Now this area we talked about quite a while ago, and I got some comments, people saying, you know, we should certainly have some more like advertising or things up here. And I always kind of knew I wanted to do something with this, but as we were connecting that elevated walkway, I realized, wow, we could actually create more upper shopping center kind of stuff if we just extend the walkway along the side. So that's what we did, and now we have some nice elevated shopping. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this episode. I know it was kind of quick, but we'll come back next time and start detailing the station and really throwing in the details that tie this area together. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.